talk about this woman in her alabaster box. Well, let me close here. I want you to understand that God is looking for people to be a little more like Mary. Less logical and more generous with our treasures. Less analytical and more compassionate. Less self-centered and more Christ-centered. Less concerned about what somebody might think or say and more anxious to honor the one who loved us first. And that's what I want to let somebody know today. Don't ever allow anybody to get you to the point where you stop worshiping God and start worrying about your critics. Don't you let anybody put a pause on your praise, a block on your blessing. Don't let anybody put your jail in joy. You ought to give God a praise when you walk in this sanctuary. You ought to lift up holy hands and bless the Lord. Oh, Lord, have mercy. And so in this text we see God using ordinary folk to do extraordinary things. And that's what you got to do. You got to shake off the haters. Matter of fact, look at your neighbor and say, get off me. You ought to shake off the haters and determine in your mind, I'm not going to let anybody stop me from being used by God. Church folk are always trying to decide who can be used, trying to decide who God will use. But I want to let somebody know that if a donkey can talk, God can use me. If a cock can crow, God can use me. If rocks can cry out, God can use me. And God can do extraordinary things. I may not have the equipment. I may not have a big title, but I'm here to tell you that God specializes in using folk that are too low to be lifted, too dirty to be cleaned, too cracked to be cured, too lost to be found, too broken to be fixed, too hurt to be healed, too fractured to be mended, too oppressed to be renewed, too wounded to be redeemed. God uses folk that are too bruised to be anointed, too sinful to be saved, too broken to be blessed. And I want to let somebody know it does not matter if you stepped out, if you cracked out, if you dropped out, if you flunked out, if you drank out, if you walked out, if you tripped out, if you wore out, it does not matter. God can still use you. So the next time you feel inadequate, just know that you're in good company and you're in the right place at the right time to be used by God. Noah was a drunk, but God used him. Abraham was old, but God used him. Jacob was a liar, but God used him. Leah was considered ugly, but God used him. Joseph was abused, but God used him. Moses had a stuttering problem, but God used him. And God didn't stop there. Gideon was afraid, but God used him. Samson was a womanizer, but God used him. God didn't stop there. Rahab was a prostitute, but God used him. Jeremiah and Timothy were considered too young, but God used them. And God, look at your neighbor and say, he didn't stop there. Yeah, yes, David had an affair and was a murderer, but God used him. Elijah was suicidal, but God used him. Isaiah preached naked, but God used him. And God didn't stop there. Jonah ran away from God, but God used him. Naomi was a widow, but God used her. Job was broken and bankrupt, but God him. Peter denied him, but God. Lord have mercy. The disciples fell asleep while Jesus was praying, but God used them. Martha worried about everything, but God used her. Mary Magdalene was cleansed of 7 demons, but God. The Samaritan woman that's at the well, Lord have mercy, had 5 husbands, and the one she was living with wasn't even one of them, but God used her. Zacchaeus was too small, but God used him. Paul persecuted the saints of God, but God, I gotta sit down here. God used him. And let me tell you something else. Lazarus was once dead, but God used him. I'm here to tell somebody, God can resurrect your dead situation. God can pick you up, turn you around. God can heal your body. God can forgive your sin. God can stop your habits. God can repair your reputation. God can do everything but fail. God can use you. Look at somebody and tell them God wants to use you. So get up out your seat or do nothing. God. I gotta sit down here, but I heard the songwriter say, have you any rivers that seem uncrossable? Have you any mountains that you cannot tunnel through? God specializes in doing things that you thought were impossible, and he can do what no other power but Holy Ghost power can do. Tell somebody, I'm gonna let the Lord use me. Yeah, I am gonna start that business. Yeah, I am going back to school. Yeah, I am going to graduate. Yeah, I'm putting my home back together. Yeah, God, use me. Use me. Use me. Use me. Use me. Thou art the potter. I am the clay.